Okay, so the $14 trillion number we reported with Dylan Radigan the other day on Monday, I think it was, or what day is today? Wednesday? So Monday. We have, so the real numbers are out, or the final numbers are out. We have to amend that. We're going to amend that 14 trillion number we gave you on Monday. And Dylan, we're going to be calling him in a second. But first, before I call Dylan Radigan to bring him in and talk about what happened today, the deal that's gone through the Senate, I want to show you how it was reported in NBC News, and then I want to show you how it was actually how it should be reported by Dave Dayen. So this is how they reported what happened. I'll just let's go through this really fast. Although the full text of the bill is not yet known, lawmakers indicated Tuesday that it would include the initial GOP proposal for direct cash payments to Americans. Under the plan, people making up to $75,000 a year are expected to receive checks of $1,200. Couples making up to $150,000 would receive $2,400, with an additional $500 per child. The new agreement removed the phase-in provision that would have excluded lower-income Americans from receiving the full benefit. The payments would decrease for those making more than $75,000 and with an income cap of $99,000 per individual or $198,000 for couples. The bill is also expected to include roughly $100 billion in assistance for hospitals, $350 billion in assistance to small business, $500 billion in aid for corporations. That's not the real truth. It includes including airline companies and cruise lines that have been hurt by the outbreak, and about $150 billion for state and local stimulus funds. Unemployment insurance would also be significantly bolstered for 4 months by increasing payments and extending the benefits to those who typically do not qualify, such as gig economy workers, furloughed employees, and freelancers. I heard that it was Bernie Sanders who made sure that got put in that bill. I'll have to check the veracity of that, but that sounds like something Bernie would do. So it sounds like Bernie got the gig economy workers in there, and got some relief. Specifically, the bill would increase the maximum unemployment benefit that a state gives to a person by $600 per week, and according to Schumer, ensures that laid-off workers, on average, will receive their full pay for 4 months. 4 months. So laid-off workers going to receive their full pay for 4 months. That's according to Chucky the Shoom. The agreement also would prohibit businesses controlled by Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, and members of Congress and heads of executive departments from receiving loans or investments from the Treasury program. Okay, so that's how NBC reported it, and there's a lot of good information in there. So let's go over to Dave Dayen over at the American Prospect, and his headline for this story is "Unsanitized Bailouts, a Tradition Unlike Any Other." So he talks about in 2008-9 when we bailed out the Wall Street. At first, the Democrats weren't going to give the bailout, and then they said, "Well, we're going to give you we're going to give you an oversight board that'll make sure it's spent correctly." And then the Democrats are like, "Okay." And that's pretty much what's happening again. So he says, after just a couple of weeks of extreme social distancing measures, the Treasury Department asked for a large bailout, this time of the entire corporate sector. The bill, as written, initially would have made all bailout activities secret for 6 months. This is like mafia stuff. This is like the mafia. So Democrats balked at that first offer and then agreed to a few mostly meaningless bits of oversight and some promises to help ordinary people. In fact, they're the same bits of oversight from the 2008 TARP bailout, a 5-member oversight panel, and an inspector general for the program. So at first they're calling it a slush fund. They're saying all this stuff, and now they're like, okay, you give us a panel that. First of all, their panel is supposed to oversee $4 trillion. 5 people. The enormity of this bailout is being underreported. The number you're hearing is $500 billion. Of that, $75 billion goes to the airline industry, and the mysteriously named business critical to national security. So that's where it's going. The other $425 billion helps capitalize a $4.25 trillion with a T leveraged lending facility at the Federal Reserve. So what that means is, so you know how your bank doesn't have, like if everybody went to take their money out of the bank doesn't have it. They only keep 10% in reserve. So what they're going to do is they're going to give this $425 billion to the Fed, and then they can lend out 10 times whatever that is, which turns out to be $4 trillion. You see what I'm saying? So then they get to pick who they give this money to, because, all right, so I hope you understand that. That's my limited knowledge of how banking works. That's what that means. So they're going to put $425 billion to the Fed, and then they can lend out $4.25 trillion on. Okay, you get it. The taxpayer dollars would soak up any losses from that lending program. The loans won't be secret anymore, but the oversight is largely after the fact. Without subpoena power and mainly reduced to writing reports, that's it. So this panel doesn't have oversight. They don't have subpoena power. They don't have subpoena power. And they can only do oversight after the money has been given out. This is nuts. This is the mafia. This is the mafia. And the mafia now is Wall Street. And they own your politicians. They're their little, they're the heads of the crew. So Schumer's the head of the Democrat crew, and McConnell's the head, or Trump's the head of the Republican crew. The loans won't be secret anymore, but so they won't have subpoena power, and they can only check on how they're spending this stuff after it's already spent. How exactly do you expect a small, underfunded panel to find fraud in a $4.25 trillion lending facility? They don't expect them to find it. That's why they're doing it this way. This is stunning. This is what happens when you don't have people in Congress who are elected by the people, but elected by the money of the corporation. Especially when the current administration explicitly believes they are not required to turn over anything to Congress. Yeah. So how is this oversight panel going to do any oversight in this situation, especially when the Trump administration is not going to turn over anything to Congress? So it's not a $2 trillion bill. It's closer to $6 trillion. And $4.3 trillion of it comes in the form of a bazooka aimed at CEOs and shareholders with almost no conditions attached. At the moment, nobody's seen the language, but there's apparently only a buyback ban for the term of the loan. So there isn't a ban on, what I'm reading into this, there isn't a ban on CEO compensation, bonuses, all that stuff. The money cannon can therefore go to executive compensation and mergers or wholesale purchases of distressed businesses or whatever other financial engineering the accounting department can muster. So all this money, so what they're doing is they're going to pump all this money into big corporations, $4.25 trillion. So now these corporations are going to have all this dough. And so the small businesses aren't going to have all this dough because they're giving them much less money and they're giving it to them in a much slower way. We'll get to that. And so what the big corporations are going to do now is buy up all these small corporations. They're going to have more consolidation of capitalism.
Jimmy, where did they get the money?
So
where are they getting this money? Where do they have the money for this? Where do they get the money?
You tell me. And once the company returns to health, it can leak out cash to investors. And during the loan, too, in dividends.
You get dividends during a crisis?
Unbelievable. There's no requirement to keep workers hired for big business, but there is for small businesses. But for big businesses, you can fire whoever you want, and you still get the money. In fact, the necessary provision to boost unemployment insurance for 4 months to 100% of median salary, including furloughed workers, gig workers, and freelancers, means that these companies can fire with relative impunity. Members of Trump's family can get bailout funds. So yay! This is what Dave Dayen says. He says, this is a robbery in progress. And it's not a bailout for the coronavirus. It's a bailout for 12 years of corporate irresponsibility that made these companies so fragile that a few weeks of disruption would destroy them. The short-termism and lack of capital reserves funneled record profits into a bathtub of cash for investors. That's who's being made whole here. Financiers and the small slice of the public that owns more than a trivial amount of stocks. So they're doing it again. They're doing it again, and don't expect them to do any better in the House. They're doing it again. They're bailing out the 1% and huge corporations, and they're doing it on your back. In fact, they were already made whole, the big corporations and the financiers. Yesterday, Wall Street got the word that they'd be saved, and stocks and bonds went wild. They had their biggest gain ever in the history. Isn't that something? BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, is running these bailout programs for the Fed and could explicitly profit if the Fed buys its funds, which it probably will. This is a rubber stamp on an unequal system that has brought terrible hardship to the majority of America. The people get a $1,200 means-tested payment and a little wage insurance for 4 months. And corporations get a transformative amount of play money to sustain their system and wipe out their competition. Small businesses get their own program. So here's what they shouldn't have done. So let's just take that first part of the bill, the bailout of corporate America. Why the bailout of corporate America and the payment to workers? Why not make those two bills, you assholes?
Yes.
Why not make those two bills? Because Chuck Schumer's donors told him not to. So we can speed through this corporate hijack. We could speed through this corporate socialism because we could tie it to payment to workers. Small businesses get their own program and can't participate in the $4.3 trillion bonanza. They get $300 billion. So do the math on who supported more. They get forgivable loans if they keep staff on the payroll. So if you have a small business and you get a loan from the government right now, they'll forgive those loans, meaning you're going to get free money if you keep your staff hired. But if you don't keep your staff hired, you got to pay back that loan. Guess who doesn't have to abide by those rules? Huge corporations. Boeing, Amazon, United Airlines. They don't have to abide by those rules. But if you own a restaurant, you do. You own a comedy club, you have to abide by those rules. They get forgivable loans if they keep staff on the payroll. There's no such requirements for the corporates. While the Federal Reserve, which can transfer money from the cash cannon with ease, runs the corporate bailout, the hapless Small Business Administration will deal with the small businesses. They have been endlessly criticized for delays on their couple billion in loan guarantee programs, let alone $300 billion. These guys can't even keep a website running. That's the Small Business Association, one of the worst departments of all of the government. Small Business Bureau. Or the Small Business Administration. The monopolists get concierge service. The small businesses get to take a number. And the result will be almost certainly massive concentration of power. So that's what's going to happen. Small businesses are going to get bought up by big corporations. You know how everything's a cheesecake factory? You know, there's going to be, everything's going to be a cheese. Every restaurant, that looks like what's going to happen here. There's also $150 billion for state and local governments and $130 billion for hospitals. Though not much for actual equipment, it seems to fix certain existing problems with their businesses. So that's two totally different stories. The NBC News story and this story from Dave Dane's American Prospect. Those are two totally different stories. So there you go. That's where we're at. We're exactly where we were, worse than where we were in 2008, 2009. Worse. And there's just doesn't seem to be any Medicare for all in there. Just can't 4.25 trillion like that, but we can't afford Medicare for all. Of course, we can afford Medicare for all. So hopefully this will put I thought the last bailout should have put the end to how you're going to pay for that, but Bernie could not push back effectively against demented, death-rattled Joe Biden when he made that argument 3 times at the debate last 2 Sundays ago. So hopefully the coronavirus is doing Bernie's debate practice for him. Hopefully we won't have to rely on Bernie to make this case anymore, because coronavirus is making it for us. Because for whatever goddamn reason, no progressive, including Bernie, could knock down that stupid argument hard enough on television. How are you going to pay for it? How about you don't even entertain that stupid question? How about you make that question out? How about you reveal that question to be as stupid as it is? It's nothing but a corporate talking point that gaslights American people into thinking they can't have what they're goddamn supposed to have. Well, I don't know Joe, you're my friend. You're a decent guy. You're going to beat Trump. The latest legislative text confirms that direct subsidies, not just loans, for airlines, direct subsidies. The text says that aid shall exclusively be used for salaries, wages, benefits, and includes $25 billion for air carriers, $4 billion for cargo carriers, and $3 billion for airline contractors. So there you go. There's your bailout, Steph. There's your bailout. What do you think of that, miserable
Well, why
liberal?
do the airlines need a bailout if they're reducing everything? I don't understand the math. I don't understand it. And this really goes back to in 2008, we did nothing to review how we got fucked.
So all these corporations over the past since then have been doing all these scams, like buying back stock. Instead of keeping cash in reserve for times like this, they've been buying back stock, which artificially inflates the price of their stock. So everybody who owns stock makes more money, which means their CEO and all the people on their board and everybody makes more money. So so now we're going to reward that bad behavior. And I just still don't understand. I do not understand why you're going to give money to an airline that isn't flying as if they are. When we have Dylan back on at 6:30 in 30 minutes. So we're going to call him up in 30 minutes and I'm going to ask him. I asked him this before. He explained it. I still don't understand it. Why do we have to give money to a business? Why can't we just give money to the people? You just like FDR, you put the money in the pocket of the worker. So
why can't the government just repossess all the companies that failed?
Steph, that's another point. There's no equity ownership in any of these corporations. So that's not happening. At least even Barack Obama. Can you explain
equity ownership?
So what it means is if you go out of business and you come to me, you say, Jimmy, I need money to keep my business going. Can you give me some money? And I'll go, well, how much do you need? You go, well, I need half of what my business is worth to keep going. And I go, okay, well, I give you half of what it's worth. I should get half of the stock. I should own half of your company. That's called equity. So if I'm going to give you half of the money that your company's worth to keep you going, I should own half of your company. And then when your company starts to be profitable, the profits get funneled back to me. That's not what they're doing. Me being the United States taxpayer. That's not what they're doing. So they're not doing that. Of course, the government should have equity or ownership in a company that it completely buys. So I'm a small business. We could go get some of this money. We have, how many employees we have? We have a bunch. So we should. There's a lot of things happening there. You see how the corporation owns the politician who then writes this thing to totally just funnel money to the 1% in the corporations and screwing over even small businesses. Isn't that amazing? Republicans are always like, we're here for small business, but they're fucking them. Look at how much more money they're giving to, it's just amazing. And so what are corporations going to do with that money? They're going to take that money and they're going to buy up a bunch of small businesses, and now you're going to have big monopolies everywhere, which we already have. This is amazing. Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?